Okay, so I want to run through exactly what you do if everything was turned off. I'm even going to close down this program, and you just come in. Okay. The important thing to know with EEG is that it's all about time. Like, it measures everything in milliseconds, and that's why it's useful. So with fMRI, where you scan the brain, it's useful because you can localize things in different parts. But EEG is pretty bad for that, but it's brilliant for timing. So if you want to know what happens at exactly 170 milliseconds after you see the image, you want to use this. So because timing is so important, there's always going to need to be a link between two computers. The one that's running a presentation that you're showing your participant, and the one that's recording. And this link needs to be instantaneous, because you need to be recording exactly what's happening, exactly as they see something. Okay, so that's the main thing to remember, that anything we use here is going to be about communication between the two computers, presentation computer and the recording computer, and communication between those computers and the participant's head, because the EEG is swimming around. So some things you need to do before the participant arrives, that's just handy, is I haven't got everything set up here because I want to show you how to do it, but there's about 10 minutes of prep you can get rid of out of the way before the participant arrives. And because the participant is going to probably be testing for, maybe set up for an hour and testing for an hour, it's good to have things done beforehand. The things you need to do before the participant gets here, the most important thing is to put a sign on the door to say you need to be quiet. Because we're measuring brain activity, anything the participant hears will register as a blip on the EEG. So I got around that by testing at 8 PM at night when there's no one here, and you still put up a sign to say be quiet. Put the sign on the door, set up the equipment. The presentation program, presentation is what I run my stimuli on, and it's very good because its timing because timing is what I'm interested in. Presentation is good at being accurate in terms of time. So I can set up my presentation experiment tailored to participants. So I usually have checklists written on the wall of things I need to do. One of them will be the checklist just for presentation, so nothing needs to do with EEG. So say I'm running brain, I'll need to put in the stimuli that I need for brain, and I'll have that all set up. Okay, when the participant arrives then, there's a couple of checklist things you need to do. Phones need to be completely turned off because they'll interfere if they're on. I'm not doing it today because we need the light, but we should have a blackout blind here, or else it needs to be dark. There should be no extra light coming in, the darker the better. So close the blinds, the room needs to be quiet, as I said. Fluorescent lights interfere with EEG. So either have a room with normal lights, or what I do is I do all the setup with the lights on, but have a non-fluorescent lamp during testing. So I'm setting up the participant and everything with the lights on. As soon as I go to hit test, turn off the light and turn on the lamp so I can still see. Just make sure the temperature's alright. You can see that it's cold here today. Anything like this will register in a participant. If the participant is very hungry or the participant's very cold, it's going to register, it's going to interfere. So make sure they've eaten, make sure they've gone to the toilet, and make sure that they're warm enough. Toilet is particularly important because they're going to be there for maybe 2 hours, and they can't move. And if they do need to go to the toilet, it's really obvious in their head. I had a participant vomit once when I was testing them, that was good. So then it gets to the setup. Or Bren, do you want to do that? Now it's on tape. Bren, do you want to come and sit down?
Yeah. Can I just ask?
Yes.
You're on from presentation. What
Yes.
about PowerPoint or Windows Media Player or stuff like videos and all?
You see, I wouldn't run anything with videos because I'm measuring. I need the computer to register. This picture came up now, and exactly 100 milliseconds after this picture came up, the participant had a reaction. I can't do that with video because it's just playing.
Yeah.
I can, if I have a video, I can program triggers into video so that when a certain scene comes up in the video, it will tell me how long things happen after that.
And software-wise, it's compatible?
I haven't used the software. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I just know the presentation's fantastic with it, and I would ask the manufacturers of BioSemi whether it's okay to use slower. But that's a good question. Sorry, you're not my student. My colleague. Okay, so when the participant arrives, you have to measure their head first. I already know what size their head is. We have two caps. Yeah, we have two EEG caps in psychology. We've the red one, which is the larger, and we've the yellow one over there, which is smaller. And to be honest, you never really need to use a smaller one unless it was a tiny head. And always err on the side of tightness. Why are you all laughing at me?
I just made the assumption that I won't need the smaller one as already.
No, in general, I've only used the smaller one once because, but you should err on the side of tightness. So this is what's called a medium cap, but I'd use it on people with even quite larger heads because if it's in any way loose, it's not going to work. Okay, so it needs to be quiet. Do you mind if I measure your head?
No, it's fine. She's asking me now on camera. Not before.
Sorry. So you just measure around like this, and here. Do you mind me saying how big your head is?
No, that's fine.
Your head is 61 centimeters, and on the website the advice is if your head is 50 to 54 or 54 to 58 centimeters, you use this cap. But I would always use it for above that. I wouldn't get the larger cap for that. It's not going to work well, in my experience anyway. In fact, I was testing at St. Vincent's Hospital before I was testing here, and the recommendation for women was to use, say, the yellow cap or whatever cap it was, but it was still too large for the head, so I lost all the data from all my women participants because of that. So it's something that you don't necessarily even know till you get to the analysis stage.
It's because the electrodes aren't making contact with the
Exactly,
skeleton.
yeah. So, where did I put my sheet? Here it is. Okay, so I've measured Bren's head. What I do now is I set up, make sure presentation and BioSemi are working. So there's a program on your recording computer called ActiveView. It's from BioSemi, and if you have any questions at all about BioSemi or ActiveView, including what's the best way to run an experiment or anything even that they don't necessarily have to be involved with, they're really helpful and they'll tell you the best way to do things. Okay, so I have to load what's called a configuration file, which is basically, I'm using a system with 64 electrodes here and 8 hang-downs, we call them, I'll show you in a minute. But I have to tell the computer that I'm going to be recording from 64 electrodes, 8 hang-downs. And there's a standard system that I have a picture of here called the 1020 system. I'm just telling it that it's that system. So I'm just loading a configuration file here. So I go to the last tab that's called About ActiveView. Then I click on Load Config File. I go into Configuring folder and the 1020 system, which I explained is that there. 1020 system 64 plus 8. 64 electrodes plus 8 hang-downs. So that's now loaded. The other thing I have to make sure I check is I go to Monocular Display and Triggers, the first tab, and over where it says Decimation, I change that to 1/16, 1/16. This is important for the rate it will record from the head. So that has to be on 1/16, and you have to do that when it's stopped. It won't work if you try to do it when it's started. So if you panic because it's not pressable, just stop the program and change it to that. So okay, now I'm going to set up the participant because I've done everything I can. So without setting you up, set them up as late as possible because the more they're sitting there, not only the more annoyed they are, but the more likely they are to move. And once this is on and the gel is on, if they're moving a lot, it's not going to work. And it has happened with participants shuffling around a lot, or one particular participant kept going like this. Obviously, that's going to completely ruin everything. The cap has colour-coded and labelled and numbered set slots for the plugs to go in a minute, for the electrodes to go in. Again, that's written down here about where these should be, but it's basically the ones that say FP and F are the ones that go in the front, okay? So I'm going to beautify Bren here.
You can do that while it's on me.
Do you want me to do it first so you won't be
Maybe.
sitting? Okay,
Maybe then
we'll do
I'll
this
do-
first, okay, before I put the cap on Bren.
Sorry.
That's alright, just apologise to all the viewers on YouTube. The comments won't be kind to you.
This is going to get so many million views. It's amazing.
So many hits. Okay, right. The 3 pieces of equipment, and again, I would have set this up just before the participant came in, but I wanted to show you how to use it. This is the battery that powers the EEG. There's 2 batteries, and there's a spare one over there. There's 2 batteries. If one is running low, and it will tell you it's running low by blinking, take it away and use the other one, because it will run out very quickly. And remember, the experiments can be over an hour long, so if this runs out in the middle of your testing, you're dead. So the battery is here. This is the main EEG box that everything gets plugged into in a minute. I just sit that on top of the battery. It clips on. And then this connects, this is just a plug from the battery to the main EEG box. Sorry, I've never done this upside down before. Okay, turn on the power, and there should be a green light on both boxes if they're connected, which there is. And the battery light isn't blinking, so I know that it's okay for charge. Okay, this is the other important box. This box is going to be what communicates between the two computers. So remember I said the two need to talk to each other in terms of timing. This is that box. So this long orange cable connects these two. It's very delicate. The ends of the cables are protected by these black caps when you're not using them. I always leave them in the bottom of my computer thing so I don't lose them because they're really easy to lose. So I'm going to connect I'm going to connect the orange cable to the main box and to the little box. The plugs are a little tricky. And then I connect the box to the stimulus computer, presentation computer. Does anyone want to tell any filler jokes while I'm doing this? Jeez, you're worse than my students. We're not talking. Okay.
Have you no EEG jokes?
No,
Yeah, I was
not
going to
really.
say, an
I don't know if
EEG
there are,
machine
yeah.
and an fMRI machine walk into a bar. But I don't know.
And the fMRI goes, have you got the time?
There you go. You just went 5 stars.
Okay, so that's connected to that. And now, seeing as this is the kind of central communication box, it also has to get connected to this computer. So this is pretty much connected to everything.
That wire you put in was to the one that's going to
That's
show
the
the...
presentation computer,
Okay.
yeah, the big wire. There's a nice diagram. There's a blue folder here that has all the tips for setting up EEG and cleaning the equipment and looking after the equipment. There's a nice diagram that when I even get confused and forget, it tells me where to put things into. That's what I have it open right now. You're alright.
And then...
So this plug is just plugging into the actual computer, and it's powering the whole box. So when I've plugged that in, a green light goes on to say that it's on, powered. Okay, so now I'm going to put the cap on. Is that alright?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Don't
It's
worry
okay.
here. You end up apologising to people a lot. I'll make sure your hands aren't freezing as well because it's not nice. But it's kind of like hairdressing. You get to talk to people really well when you're doing this. There's 2 little ear holes, but they rarely fit people's ears, I have to say. I look a bit like God when your ears coming out here. Okay. And if you talk in soothing tones, it makes it easier. Is that not too tight on your chin?
No, it's fine.
Okay. So, when you're positioning the hat, you're trying to make sure that it's obviously pretty even and centered. The best way to do this is there's an electrode right in the middle called CZ, and if you kind of poke it in and you ask the participant, like, does it feel too far to the left or right?
Okay.
I think, does it feel too far to the left or right?
Maybe a tiny bit to the right, but not too...
So I should move it to the right? Or
Move it to the left a little.
your
Just
left?
a tiny bit. Yeah, my left. Just, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, that
Any
seems
better?
fine. Yeah.
Okay. So that's fine. There's plenty more tips on the internet about how to best locate that. Okay, so I'm going to start putting in the electrodes. The electrodes come in 2 lots. Obviously, if it was a bigger system, they come in more than 2 lots. Do one at a time and work from the back to the front. That way it's much less likely, if you're working from the back to the front, you're much less likely to have the participant move and pull them out as you're working forwards. Whereas if you work from the front to the back, they're more likely to yank the front ones out. Okay, so I'm going to do the entire left side of Bren's head first, working from back to front. This can be a bit messy. Friend over here. Okay, so I have plenty of tissue paper ready. This gel, before this type of system was invented, you'd have to, EEG was usually only used for medical purposes because you'd have to shave someone's head usually, or shave part of their head, to get the electrodes to get onto their skin. But you'd also have to scratch the head so much with a little piece of metal before applying the electrode that it was quite painful and it would irritate the skin quite badly. Things have gotten a lot better. These are called active electrodes, so much more powerful that I'm using, and you just need some gel between the electrode and the head to conduct the electricity. So we've a lot of this gel in School of Psychology, but you can just order it off the website when it runs out.
Am I right in saying it's just kind of like a salt water solution gel thing?
Well, you can just use salt water solution if you want, but this is it is kind of like that, yeah. Yeah, so the gel, the one thing I will say about the gel is when you have a participant, warn them before they come to your experiment that they're going to have gel in their hair, their hair's going to be dirty afterwards. And unless, when I went to St. Vincent's, they had a kind of bathroom shower place, but you're not really going to have a shower after an experiment, you're going to go home. So it will, basically the gel, and this is one of the reasons why cleanup is so important later, the gel hardens later on, not during the experiment, but if you left it on for hours, it's going to harden, so it will get really icky in your hair if you don't wash it out. So do warn participants not to go on a date that night or something straight after, or to do a presentation to the School of Psychology or anything straight after. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the left ones. You know they're the left ones because all the odd numbers are the left ones, okay? I said I was going to start at the back, and these all are in order, starting from these ones are the front and these ones are the back. That they go in order.
Okay.
So it's easy to get it right. Okay. So I hope you can see this. If not, you can stand up. All I do is I insert the tip of this syringe into the cap. It's not very sharp, it's a plastic syringe. I insert it into the little hole in the cap, and I just wriggle around a little bit in case somebody's thick hair is between me and the scalp. Your hair is fine, but other people have very thick curly hair, and it's harder to get contact. So I'm going to start at the back left here. Okay, so I put it in, wriggle it around a bit, and insert the gel. I'm going to actually do this for all of the left ones because it's the quickest way to do it. If you fill all the gel of the left hand side first, then insert all the electrodes. Again, you might want to talk amongst yourselves while I'm doing this.
I think because my hair is shorter, Helen's not using
Too much gel.
a lot.
Well, I'll tell you, if it might be a good tip to even see this, when you put it in, you put in the syringe right to the bottom, it's touching the scalp before you press in, and you let the gel rise up all around, you keep it on touching the scalp, let it rise up till it's filled with the little hole. Okay? Well, I have got an important tip, so this is going to need to be in it. The gel, as I said, conducts the electricity from the scalp to the electrode, okay? So it's very important when I put in gel that I don't put in so much gel, or the cap's not too loose, that the gel from two neighbouring electrodes touches. Because if it does, I'm not going to get anything, okay, from those two electrodes. It's going to mess everything up. So it's what tends to happen is, when I turn this on and see is the cap all set up and working, a lot of the times it's not, and I have to go back to particular electrodes and put in a bit more gel. There's where the danger is, when you're putting in extra gel, that you can bridge between two neighbouring electrodes, and you lose the data then from them. So don't overdo the gel. It's very frustrating because sometimes you can spend a lot of time setting up, organising a participant, getting the stimuli ready and setting them up, and then realise it's just not working when you press record. And it happens quite a lot. I tested, I think, 35 participants to get 19 participant data.
Wow.
So, and it's quite common. I thought that was just me for a while, but apparently it's quite common that you just lose a lot of data and you don't know why. Okay, nearly done with the left hand side.
And how did you find people, what was people's reaction like to when they were in? I know they knew what was involved beforehand, but do people usually leave in good humour?
Very different for the two sets of people. People who'd studied psychology were brilliant with this. People who hadn't were very scared, and the one thing I forgot to mention to them that I now know is to tell them that you think it's stupid, but to tell them that I'm recording electrical voltage. I'm not putting any electricity into them, because a lot of them are very scared about that.
Okay.
And they had heard of all those famous psychology experiments where you trick people and all that. So it's very important to tell people that if they're not from psychology particularly. Sorry, I forgot one here. So just to know, there's two here. There's two electrodes, the most two important ones at this stage of recording are called CMS and DRL, and they're kind of like the ground or main electrodes for the whole thing. Most of the time, when I go here to see if this is working or not, most of the time if I fix CMS and DRL correctly, it will work again. So these are the two important ones. I'm going to plug them in. CMS and DRL. The cap's actually not that tight on your brain, so I hope.
Yeah.
And you don't. Don't touch it. I'm just saying. I hope it works.
Okay.
And so I'm saying the cap's not that tight on him, and his head is 3 centimeters larger than the recommended size for this. So you can see that it's hard. Plus, people have different size heads. Some people's heads come out more here. Bren's doesn't, and it allows for people's head to come out more at the back. So it's just tough sometimes with people's heads. There's nothing you can do. But yeah, people generally do leave not upset but incredibly tired and in a bad mood.
Okay. Nice.
Because apart from anything else, they'll have been, after all this, when they're sitting here quite uncomfortable, especially when I stick things on his face in a few minutes. Sorry, Brendan's face. I stick things on Brendan's face in a minute. You become uncomfortable, but also you're looking at a screen, a bright screen. And remember I said the blinds are closed and the lights are off. The screen seems a lot brighter then. And normally when we're looking at a screen, we tend to be looking away quite a lot. But when you're doing an experiment like I'm going to be doing with Brent, he has to look at it the whole time and press buttons. So your eyes get incredibly tired. People's eyes have been watering throughout these experiments and everything. So.
And then add to that the cognitive tasks they might have to do for some studies.
Exactly.
Is the reason for having the blind down so there's no visual distraction, or does it actually need to be dark?
But both. No visual distraction of any kind, because people are devils, and also it's the just to make the computer that bit brighter as well, so that you're because I'm looking at visually evoked potentials. I want it to be a really kind of important stimulus, you know.
Yeah, I was asking that because I was wondering if you backlit it with an even backlighting, would it reduce that problem? But if you actually want a comparatively bright screen, obviously not.
Well, I think I do, but I mean, I'm not an expert, and the amount of training I received on this was this much. So that's a question for the internet, I think. These are all, when you get to know the brain, or if you're doing EEG, you're going to be interested in the brain, and they're all labeled like CP3, or like C is for central, or FC is frontocentral, and T is temporal. Like they're labelled very clearly. About P is parietal. They're labelled very clearly. It's hard to make a mistake really as to what you're doing, and you just plug the correct one into the correct hole basically.
So you're matching colours and numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very easy. So again, this is only the left-hand side. You have to do it twice, and it's quite boring. Okay. Take this one, and I'm just going to leave it on your shoulder there, Bren.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to do the right side. Okay. How are you finding it, Bren?
It's fine. I could look into everyone's offices over here.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Where are we now?
Yeah.
Peter, going back to your question earlier about how people find it as well, if they're not psychologists, I find it easy if you have really calming doctoral tones, they get really soothed by that, you know, if you're like, okay, now we're going to do this. They think you're a real professional, like.
Yeah.
Just seem confident in whatever you're doing.
What happens if you do talk to Nick from The Simpsons?
Haven't tried it.
I also think that if the gel didn't go into one of the things or something, and you say, they might.
Yeah,
if
don't
they
say
don't
that.
know anything about it, they won't
avoid
realise that that's actually.
Yeah, that should be paramount.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Don't say
This is the nitric acid.
Or when you start analysing their brainwaves, don't go weird.
Yeah, that's true.
Even if some people do look incredibly weird, their brainwaves.
That won't be happening today.
No, yours are beautiful brainwaves. Your brain responds
Wait a
perfectly to all my
minute.
stimuli.
You're just saying that to be calm
No.
and soothing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Is there any value in asking the participants feedback while you're doing that? Helen? I can feel you're doing each of those okay.
Yeah.
But I suppose if I wasn't familiar with it,
There's no point because I'll see it now when I go to set up the program. If one isn't connecting, I'll just unplug it and put more gel in. You know,
Okay,
because you don't want to pressurize the participant either. All the other systems prior to this type of system, you'd have to have like a Faraday cage. You'd have to be in a room where there was no electrical interference at all, which is quite hard when you're running things on computers. But now this new system called BioSemi, it's not that new. It's been around since the 90s. Has what's called active electrodes. So before it would take the electricity, bring it to somewhere, it would need to be shielded all that way. There's kind of a shield within each electrode. So it's a brilliant system. It's just leaps and bounds ahead of what we used to have. Now, I know I've been kind of rushing this, so I'm hoping it's all going to work.
it's definitely not going to work.
You do tend to rush it anyway because you're so worried that the participant's going to be upset or, you know, you feel kind of apologetic for putting them through all this.
I suppose if you've been clear at the start about
Yeah.
like maybe how long
How long
you've
it's
taken
gonna
up
be.
and they've agreed,
Yeah.
then you can maybe
Well, the other thing is, they don't seem to know, like from now, like the participant isn't allowed to move his head. Like, Bren knows this because he's done it so many times, but you're not, from this stage, if you start going like this, the electrodes aren't, they're going to come away from where they're originally touching the scalp. It's not going to work. So it happens a lot. So even things like blowing your nose and things can, it's obviously you can't deny a participant blowing your nose, but it can really affect this type of thing. The other thing is, once I have these all plugged in, and when I'm recording, the participant, every blink, every cough, every swallow comes up in EEG, and every time they do that, that piece of data is unusable. So you encourage your participants not to go mad with blinking, but you can't, I mean, I did give the advice to someone once who was in a position of power under me, and I didn't realise that he took it really seriously and tried not to blink for the entire 45 minutes, and then his tears streaming down his face. So you have to be careful how you say to people as well. Try not to blink too much can be interpreted as don't blink, you know. I just mean don't be like chewing your lip or blinking loads or sneezing if you can help it.
Sorry, just as you mentioned every single one of those things I've wanted to do.
Yeah, I was
That's
going
it.
to say that, but when you do mention it, does that not make people want to do it more?
Well, I usually I should have told them before, just before our sentence. And it's only now they can be blinking and doing this stuff. It's when I start recording that it will affect it. But at the same time, you record hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trials. So the trials you try are just trials you're
Yeah, I was
going
going to say, in the same way that you're saying that you found that, well, not just in your case, but in other cases, you found that subsequently that people often lost data with participants.
Yeah.
In the same way, just within the actual experiment
Yeah.
itself, you err on the side of caution, do you, and you do lows.
Yes.
Is that one of the reasons maybe you do lows?
You're right. I'll tell you why. I'm going to plug these in first.
Yeah.
You plug in the left-hand side ones into the A one here, and just plug right in. You push it until the two little white things come up at the side, and you plug the right-hand side ones into the B one. The others are for if you had a system that had like thousands of electrodes,
Okay.
you'd need them. Yes, the reason that you do hundreds and hundreds of trials for everything is if I'm showing Bren a picture of his own face
Mhm.
and a picture of a friend's face and a stranger's face, the first time I show him a picture of his own face, the electrical activity I'm recording is going to be his response to his own face, his response to sitting in a chair, his response to being in a coldish room, his response to the noise outside, everything. So if I record 300 responses to his own face compared to 300 responses to another face, I then see what the difference is and the noise is averaged out.
Yeah.
So that's why that's why these experiments take so long, because there's so
Okay.
much going on in the brain.
And I'm not sure if you're going to go into this later, but isn't there also a way where you can filter out something like a blink if you
Yes. Later on in the stage of analysis there is.
yeah.
The other thing in UCD I found, depends on the room you're in, there's electrical interference of 50 Hz interference. And I panicked because it even comes up on this, you can see that it's not really happening right. But all that you do is you just keep going calmly and record it, and at a later stage you apply what's called a notch filter, which notches out all 50 Hz activity, and you get completely clean data again.
Right, right.
So you have to make sure obviously that we're 50 Hz, it's usually set to 60 for America or wherever 60 Hz is. Right, these are the hand downs. These are going to get stuck at various places on Brent's head and face. What these measure is not the electrical activity in his head, but they're stuck on different parts of his face to measure movement, blinks, like smudges with your nose, anything like that, okay? So I've 8 of them to measure that, so that later on the software I run, after everything's collected, the software I run to analyse things can actually tell me very cleverly, here was a big blink, I can take this out for you if I like. So, and the better you are doing at that analysis software, the more you'll be able to use that rather than manually taking everything out. Okay, so these are just called EX1, EX2, EX3, all the way up to EX8. I have written down where each one goes. It's kind of important to have that because I haven't found it anywhere on the internet except from being taught it by somebody who trained me. I'm going to start with EX1 and EX2. It follows the same rule as the EEG cap. Everything that's an odd number goes to the left, everything that's an even number goes to the right. So EX1 and EX2. Sorry. EX1 and EX2 go on the 2 temples. So these are slightly different. They're very like they are still active electrodes, like the ones you plugged into the cap. But these don't have a little pluggy thing that you push in because they're not going into a cap. So what you do is you get these little double-sided sticky things, stick them on them over where the hole is, and then you just take off the other side of the double-sided sticky thing. Finally, before you put it on, you add a little dab of gel to it to make it better. Okay, then when you stick each of these on, this is another thing you prepare before the participant gets here. When you stick each of these on, you just put a piece of surgical tape over it, hold it in place. Because with these, they're kind of stuck into the cap, but these would just fall off, even though there is double-sided sticky tape. So EX1 goes on the left temple. Put it there.
Your body is the temple.
Your body's the temple. And you hold it there. EX2 then has to mirror that, because all the numbers in order mirror each other left and right. I just yanked that off his face. We cut that bit out.
Do you want to do that again? That's blooper reel.
That hurt.
No, it was fine, but I got another shock.
Sorry. Okay, so this one goes on the right temple. And this is when the participant starts to feel very uncomfortable because having things stuck on your face isn't very nice.
I feel like if I moved my eyebrows, it would make the tape a bit looser.
That's alright, there's loads of tape, but thanks.
No, but I mean, that's why I feel like I can move less.
Okay,
I
yeah.
feel like I don't want anything to come off.
Well, and he's going to have them all over his face, so it is very restrictive. It doesn't feel nice to have them on. It's not a nice feeling. 3 and 4 go on the mastoids. The mastoids is the bone just behind your ear that comes out there. So, following our convention, 3 goes on the left mastoid. Stop laughing. 3 goes on the left mastoid. You can have these little double-sided sticky things set up before the participant comes in as well. That's another time saver. Even just from a selfish reason that the longer they're here, the more they're going to move and mess your data up. So this goes on the left mastoid.
You could be like Mary Fitzgerald and say, here's one I made earlier, and have someone who's already set up walking.
Yeah. So that goes there on his mastoid, and you put the surgical tape on, and this one does hurt when you yank it off because it's obviously on top of the hair.
If you yank it off.
If you yank. I'll ask you at some stage later. I usually let the participants after the experiment take off those ones themselves because it's not nice to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So then.
And is there a reason Helen, why you do these guys after the cap?
Just because they're more likely to fall off with
Okay.
time. They're not
Okay.
secured, so if they were on beforehand, I think they'd fall off quicker.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
I only have 6 here at the moment. Brendan, do you have the other 2 for your other experiment?
I
Was
think
it?
they're in a bag.
Right, I don't really need them.
They're there, they're just...
Right, but it's just to show people. I mean, I'll just do the first 4. There's supposed to be 8 altogether. I'll do the 6, and the where you put the other 2 is written on the wall there. It's not written on the master no. Okay, sorry. So you do have to get very pally with people. It's very hairdressery, as Brent noted earlier.
You ask them like, what are they doing for the weekend?
Yeah, seriously, that type of stuff.
Where are they
Any
going?
holidays?
Busy tonight. Yeah, okay.
Have they ever had blonde highlights?
Yeah, I can't believe that. This stuff does come out. I had those as well, Brent, don't worry.
When I was younger, I even had it completely blonde, like bleached all blonde.
Like you bleached
I've
it.
seen a picture of that.
I didn't get bleach.
Like we coloured it, I mean, didn't go naturally
Yeah.
blonde.
Yeah, it was the time when the remaining football team all had blonde hair as well, and not that I followed the remaining football team, it was just they copied me.
It's all coming out. Okay. Yeah, some bees. Okay, so 5 and 6 go just under the eye on the left and right eye respectively, and these are pretty intrusive, because people can sometimes see them in the corner of your eye. You know, it's really. I don't think this is a nice part of the experiment. If I had 7 and 8, 7 goes right between your eyes and 8 goes on the tip of your nose. So you can imagine a bit of sellotape, you know, your whole face is pretty much bandaged up like a mummy. Can you move your nose okay with it being uncomfortable?
Yeah. I think though,
You
once I
on
press it down more.
Okay. Okay, so the last one of these. And I will stress again to make sure the presentation program that you're using is set up for the right stimuli for your participant, because I have set people up and realised I've left the stimuli somewhere else after this stage, so I'm not being able to test somebody, which is embarrassing apart from anything else. And you need a whole participant. So.
This video can be called Confessions of a Neuroscientist.
Now, after you have these done, you just plug them in, and they're labelled EX1 to 8, and you just plug them in EX1 to 8. I'm hoping the program is going to run properly, because I have the configuration set up for 64 plus 8, and I only have 64 plus 6 here, because the others are in a box. I could just get them if it doesn't work, so they're only on the shelf. But it should work, because if one of these was just damaged or broken, it should still just ignore that one. EX6, but you never really know. Because I haven't had a lot of training in this, you find there's a lot of tricks of the trade that you don't know. So when you meet more and more EEG people, they tell you, oh, your data isn't working because the cap's too loose, or your data isn't working because exactly what Bren's doing there. If you have your ankles crossed, for some reason that we don't know, that tends to ruin the data. So there's these little tricks of the trade that I don't know. Yeah, you know, I know some of them, but you know, it's good to know somebody's doing it. Okay, so Bren's set up, so everything's turned on. See this light, this blue light here? I should have showed you that earlier. Before I plugged in the electrodes from his head, that was flashing, blinking blue.
Yeah.
When I plugged them in, it should go solid blue, everything's good, and it is good, so that's a good sign.
Right.
I go to my ActiveE program, having already loaded my config file, and on the very top left, I check again that it's 1/16th decimation. The very top left, I click start. Yes.
Helen, can I just say about the blue light?
Yeah.
Just is that directly related to just the CMS DRL? So what happens if it doesn't go?
No, it's just
It's not?
no. It's just that I have everything connected.
Okay.
Now I might just do this at a higher. I think we might be having electrical interference. Bren, will you blink for a sec? You can see how you can even see when that's registering as a blink.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you look at these lines here, it's hard for you to know because you've never looked at it in any other way. But they look fine. The only one that's looking really dirty is this one going up and down the screen that I'm going to fix in a second.
Right.
But I will say that at the moment we are having electrical interference, and you can tell that from this data. But
Okay.
I can tell that the electrical interference is completely cleanable from this data.
Okay.
This data looks absolutely fine. But because each little one of these coloured lines going across should be a little bit more spaced out. It looks like it's really, really busy. Each frequency line should be a little bit more relaxed.
Okay.
There is clearly 50 Hz electrical interference in the room.
Right.
all I do afterwards is really easily click apply 50 Hz filter. It takes all that out and the data's really clean again.
Okay.
What I can tell is this one's gone crazy.
Right.
Now, it's hard to see, there's the names of each of the electrodes along the side here, but it's hard to see which one is which because I'm viewing it in a very, very magnified way. So if I unmagnify it more and more using this scale, this is just how I visually see the data. It doesn't affect the data. I can see that it's P9 is giving me trouble. Okay? So I just take my gel and I go to the electrode. P9, here it is.
I knew it was not.
I can tell that it's because your ear is pushing it away from the scalp. So I'm going to put more gel in. Put the electrode back in. And see has that. Yeah, this is going to be okay now. You see how that's fixed that? Just by putting more gel in. Now, the trade-off here is the more I go over and try to fix them, the more likely I am to knock others out and to make gel bridge. So I know I have a list here of the electrodes I'm going to be analysing, and it's only 14 electrodes out of 64. So I'm really going to take care to make sure they're all recording.
Yeah.
If one of those ones is bad, or one of the ones that's bad is one I'm not going to use at all, it's a trade-off. Do you really care? Because you're likely to knock out ones you will need by doing it, and then everything is wasted. You can't, if I messed up at this stage, you can't start again because the cap has to be washed, the person's hair has to be washed, everything has, you can't do it again. Okay. So you can see this data looks lovely. I'm just going to put it back to viewing it at 200 U volts, whatever that's called, just because I wanted this.
Okay.
This is only, things on the left side of the screen only affect how I view the data here. Things on the right half of the screen affect the recording. So when I change that to 1/16th decimation, that's going to affect the recording. Okay? Here you can play around with as much as you want. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start the presentation program for Bren. I'll obviously have explained the instructions to him. What I like to do as well is, if the participant needs to be a certain distance away from the computer, you can put the keyboard on the lap if you want, because it's easier than having to reach out. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to run the experiment and then explain a bit more. You enter in the subject ID and run the experiment. At this stage, when I have it ready to go, I would make sure the lights are off, the lamp is on, everything's done, I'm ready to record. I'm just going to check in case there's anything I've forgotten before I do this. Oh yes, the major thing I've forgotten to do, which is why it's really handy to have a checklist with you, I haven't started recording. So I shouldn't start the experiment till so when I press start up here, it just starts showing me images from his head. It's not saving anywhere. You need the very bottom right here is start file. So I click on start file. It gives me an option to save as subset. I'm going to have the monopolar display channels. It was originally set to the wrong one, so be careful of that. It gives me the options of just recording. I'm going to set it to, I'm going to set it to A1 to B32, 64. It was originally set to 32, not 64. Okay? It would have worked with monopolar display channels because the ones that are displayed are also the ones I'm recording, but that's unnecessary. You have the option to add 8 EX electrodes, which are these ones here. So that's ticked. I'm going to click OK. The fig file does not exist. It always says it doesn't exist, and you just type in the name of whatever your file is, test data, OK. Now, the last thing to remember, at the moment you think it might be done now because you've saved the file. There's a big red thing here saying not saving.
Yeah, sure.
It's paused. You have to click pause again. Okay? That's the big mistake I've made. I've lost whole blocks. You have to remember to click. You have to really check. It will be green when it's saving, but also you'll see the file space is going up and up, so you know that it's recording. The other thing is the files are huge, so if there's not enough space on your computer, it's not going to work. So make sure your computer is clean and empty. The other thing before I get started is maintenance of this equipment. Neither of these computers should ever be on the internet.
Okay.
Reasons being, you're storing the data on this. If it gets a virus, the data's gone, you're in a lot of trouble. But if either of these is hooked up to the internet when we're running something that's so precise to do with timing, these updates are going to pop up or something's going to happen or anything, you could get a virus. It's just not a good idea. It's good to keep these computers clean. Okay, so sorry, Bren. So you're very patient. I'm going to start the experiment here for Bren. So at the moment, Bren is seeing various images of faces and flowers, and I would have explained to Bren that he's going to see various images, say my face, his own face, and a friend's face. If he sees two images in a row that are identical, I don't mean the same identity, they're an identical image, he has to press a button.
Okay.
Now the reason I have that, the reason you'd set up an experiment like this is you need them to be doing something, so monitoring for repeats or their mind's going to wander. But if they're constantly pressing buttons, you're going to get a lot of interference from button pressing.
Would I
So,
do it?
that was just the, I only have a few set up, so I'll just keep, I'll keep setting it up again. Because I do need to show there's something else. And obviously, as I said earlier, you need hundreds of trials per type of stimulus because you need to filter out the noise, okay? So another thing I want to show you is, I will later take out, anytime he responded, I'll later delete those trials. Anytime he responded, okay? The computer will tell me every time he presses the spacebar, and I'm going to delete any information from that because it'll be contaminated with a press. Now, if you look here, another thing you have to remember is to change analog to decimal, okay? Numbers start coming up at the bottom of the screen. When I programmed this, I programmed it to give triggers, so that every time your own face came up, a number, this would say number 1, every time it was a friend's face it'd say number 2, every time a stranger's face number 3, a flower number 4, and every time it was a repeat response, it would say 250 or something different, okay? And every time you press space, it would say something else.
Okay.
So I'm going to run this again to show you what I'm seeing, to make sure that everything's running correctly. Sorry, I have the experiment run very short because I was just showing it to a lab. Usually this would go on for hours. So Bren's watching this, okay? On the bottom of the screen, as each image comes up, a 1 came up, that was my own face, a 1, my own face, a 1, my own face.
Okay, so it's like a time log almost, but it's...
Yeah,
it's
and
like
whenever
a time
there's
log.
an immediate repeat, it would say 250, and Bren presses space bar there. It will say 50 whenever he's pressed the space bar. So later on when I go to analyse the data, I can say whenever there was a 50 response, just take away that bit of data. As well as take away his eye blinks and whatnot.
Okay, because you're if you like, you're monitoring or you're analysing his behavioural responses totally separately to
Yes,
this.
yeah.
That's where you're
I don't even care about the behavioural responses.
Okay.
It's a trick to get him to be interested.
Okay.
Because if he wasn't, he'll drift. And you'll see, when people get very bored, you'll see that these will start to drift. It's called alpha drift. It's almost like going into a sleep.
Right.
People get very bored. And what I usually do is start typing on the keyboard and they think that I'm doing something to do with the experiment, and even though it's not doing anything. It's just,
That worked there, I tried to do it.
no, you can't just do alpha drift. The other reason you get alpha drift, and this comes down to designing the experiment, is with each stimulus that comes up, between each one is what's called an interstimulus interval. So basically just a blank screen between each image. If they're the exact same time, if between each image I have 1 second between each one, it really induces alpha drift because you get used to picture, picture, picture. It's a terrible idea. If you have what's called a variable ISI, that could randomly vary between 650 milliseconds and 950 milliseconds, people's brains are much more engaged because it could come up at any time, really. Not like between 8 and 20 seconds, but a small variance. You don't get the alpha drift. And these are just tips from psychophysics. So I can, if something's going terribly wrong and I need to pause it, I can pause the save and then later on continue saving. I would never use that. If something's going wrong in the middle of a block, the whole block is usually lost. You'd have to go back and fix things and start a new block, okay? It never really works that it just fixes itself. Not least because the program is going to not be in sync with the with the presentation anymore. Okay, so basically you do that, and after each block, so I usually run 4 blocks for each participant, I press stop, and now that file will be saved as 1 block. You don't just press pause, you press stop, and you'll have named that as Brendan, the date usually helps, block 1.
Okay.
Then when I want to go again, I'll press start. I'll remember to click start file and save it as a new one again and all sorts. So each block you have to do that, okay, each time. You just click through all the things it says, warning, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't mean anything, that's fine. So I'm gonna other things that are useful to know is CM in range just means everything's connected fine, and how much battery life you have left to give you a bit of a warning. Okay, so that's it. There's a couple more general tips I have before I stop you. Sorry, Brendan.
Yeah.
Is the legs crossed. I said that wooden chair and table is really important. The more metal you have in the table and chair, the more likely you are to get interference. And this is fine interference. I know that this is just 50 hertz interference, but I've recorded and it's just crazy across the screen. It doesn't mean anything. And you know then that you have to just let the participant go home because it's not usable. So the trick is of knowing that you can even tell that looks kind of alright for data. You know, it looks like in a science film what data should look like. So, except I know that this should be a little bit less dense, but it's fine. Sometimes it just looks crazy on the screen, and you know then that you have to let the participant go, but also make sure you're not just looking at the data really magnified like that. Okay, so again, when I say how you view it on the screen, that's 5, what do you call UVs as a measurement? 5 UVs of measurement. I usually look at it about 200, it's quite handy.
Can we get Brendan to move a little bit so
Yeah, Bren, do you want to...
If you want to get disrupted data, if you put a mobile phone on near it, it'll
I
probably...
don't know if it's going to work though or not with the mobile phone. I just got told. So you can see he's knocked an electrode out there now.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Did I?
That's good.
He knocked
Well,
my head.
it's probably, it's fixed itself. It was momentarily not picking up proper data. So blink again there, Brenda, go a few times. You see the links there?
Blinky.
Yeah. So obviously all those trials are way too noisy. Oh, yawns are great. You should have seen the vomit. Because all of them stayed really straight, except for about 5 that went all the way up and down the screen.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember thinking as well, if I'm serious and sad, and then I'm really happy and excited.
Yeah, but that's because your face is going and really happy and excited. It's not because you think you're happy. Anyway, excuse me. Number of trials, I've said not to have too many responses that Bren has to do because you throw those trials out. At the moment, if you're reading EEG papers before you do this, you'll be confused because it's saying data was referenced to. You're measuring here the difference in voltage between each electrode and a reference at all times. Okay, that's what you're measuring, and it will say data was referenced to X electrode or to the mastoids or to the knee. You can reference it to anything. You don't need to worry about that at all during recording with this system. This system just references each electrode to every other electrode. Okay, and then, or to CMS and DRL, that's fine. When you take Bren's data onto analysis stage, that's when you mess with where you re-reference the data and you apply the filters. So this is pretty basic, this is easy to do. It's the analysis that's very hard. I think, oh yes, please remember the screen resolution on your thing. Just remember that's just a general psychophysics thing. When you're running the experiment in EEG, it's really important if it's visual when you write your paper to say what the screen resolution was. It's really important. So if you don't, and you need to be able to go back and measure the images and all that, if you don't know that,
the distance away from the screen.
The distance away from the screen and all that, but that's just general psychophysics. Okay, so that's say this was an hour later and I'd done 4 trials with Bren, talked in soothing tones and sympathised with how hard it all was. Close that. This is all stopped and it's a lot quicker to take off than it is to put on. Right, so what I do now is you can just loosen the cap if you want to take off the cap. Most people are delighted that's quite tight on the neck.
Yeah, because it's Velcro-y.
Yeah, so you can, if you want, you can take off the ones on your face. And you can just lift the entire cap off of this, so it's very quick. There you go. So I know that's quite sore. I will be cleaning these with me. Yeah. It's pretty gross half it's still here. So we can just, everything's fine now, you can just turn off the box, anything, that's okay. As soon as you're okay with that, I'm going to show you how to take out the equipment. People love this.
Yes!
Horrible.
Get out of here!
I know, you have one of the double-sided sticky things under your right eye.
Yeah.
Okay, so cleaning these, you need to clean it quite quickly after a participant comes. You can never use it twice in a row, it won't work. Because, as I said earlier, the gel hardens after a while. So I need to...
Hardened here.
So what I need to do is I take this cap and these electrodes to the bathroom and the 8 hang-downs. All of the electrode parts that touch the head of the face are washable. You have to wash those.
Okay.
Obviously don't wash the plug parts. That's dangerous and stupid. So you take these to the nearest bathroom and you run each of them under the sink and give them a quick clean, because they're still kind of surrounded in a little bit of gel, and you want to just rub it off with what they're fine with water. Rub it off with water to make sure when it doesn't set. Then the real pain in the ass is you get the cap, you make sure there's no gel left in this. You get the cap, you put it under the tap, okay? The gel is like any gel. If you poke through it and take something back, it will reclose over itself, so it's really hard to clean out. It takes ages to clean out all the gel in these holes. It's very hard. It could take you half an hour to clean a cap, okay? You have to make sure the gel is taken out of these, because if it's not, it will harden over it, and the next person won't be able to use the system. Well, they'll have to just go and clean it, but you know, then the cap will be wet and you couldn't use it on the participant. To leave it to dry, so to ensure that it keeps its shape, you leave it to dry on Billy over here. Just put it on his head and it will dry normally.
Billy's the white one, is it?
Yes. Oh yeah. I wouldn't put it on the metal one. Yeah. The other one is just some famous psychologist guy. Then after a while, then you tell your participants, you offer them towels, which they rarely want, but they usually just want to go and wipe their head in the bathroom anyway, have a little cry, and I always have a hairdryer here as well. So the handy things to have are hairdryer. You have to have the towels, tea, coffee maker to kind of calm them down afterwards. Biscuits, just things like that, especially biscuits, because if they come in hungry, they're not going to last the experiment without their mind drifting to sandwiches and things. I know it's a selfish reason, but that's what you do. So once you have, the cleaning part is boring and takes a lot of time. Once you have that done, you literally just unplug everything, roll it up and put it back in the box. It's very easy. If the battery has been low in charge, make sure you leave that one charging. There's a set to charge it over there, and use the one next time.
And just on cleaning these, just remember to take off the
double-sided things, yes.
It's invisible once the paper is gone. Yeah.
I think that's it, isn't it? Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't know if cleaning them is any different from those.
No.
You can still use the syringe to clean it out.
And just obviously make sure that the syringe is empty and cleaned. That's it. So
Maybe it might be worth just adding on for the polygraph. There's very little difference in. It's just where you place the electrodes.
So the electrodes are more all flat electrodes, aren't they?
Yeah, and maybe we could do that at a different time, maybe with heart rate, temperature, and all. But it's very similar. You just have connections that go here, and then where these go is just different, and it doesn't have the cap, maybe.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have these pluggy in ones,
yeah,
but they're just flat instead. They're all the same type of active electrode.
Yeah.
That's it, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Helen.
Oh, and don't forget, email them if you have any problems. And also, I haven't done anything to do analysis today, but the program you analyse it with, BSIT, again, they're very helpful with anything like that. So, because you spent like 30 grand buying their system.
That's cool.
Thanks a million, Helen.
Okay, so now take two.
Yeah. Or something you'd always have up. Just your checklist to what to do and this 10-20 sheet.